It's been found from material archaeological evidence that there was a new cultural schism which took place during the Herodian era and was not seen before in the land of Judea and disappeared with the First Revolt. So it began during the reign of Herod the Great, beginning in around 30 BC, until late 60s to 70 during the First Revolt. And archaeological evidence for this schism between the social classes includes what we can see of the Judean homes. So the wealthy Jewish Herodian era homes from the 1st century BC onwards had both either Hellenistic or Roman style dining rooms. These were usually found leading from the central courtyard or the villa entranceway of the villas. The Hellenistic dining rooms were large, wide, and had at least one entrance on their long sides. Their couches and small tables were arranged in various ways. The Italian or Roman dining rooms, triclinia, were rectangular but narrower, and their single entrances were along their short walls, and they had 3 couches arranged together in a Greek P formation to allow for a fixed seating hierarchy. Some of them were colonnaded. They had columns, some of them. And all the houses from the elite quarter of Jerusalem, including on the Temple Mount, featured Western decorations. By Western, we mean Greco-Roman decorations with plastered frescoed walls and floor mosaics, usually using geometric and botanical designs. One of them features the Pompey II style. They tended to avoid graven images. I believe only one villa remains shows a graven image. Otherwise, they don't use them. Josephus does speak of Agrippa I's palace, originally that of Herod the Great, in Caesarea, having statues of his daughters. That means of Agrippa I's daughters. Agrippa was the grandson of Herod the Great, but we haven't found any evidence of statues of humans in the palace. But this is what was related by Josephus, Flavius Josephus. So the upper class, the elite Judean homes also used mikveh and oskar. That means the mikveh were for the ritual purification baths, and the oskar were for refilling the baths. And these are also found in the elite Judean homes, including in the private quarters of the Herods. So they all had them too, including Herod the Great and the others, which means this, together with the avoidance of graven images, also in the private quarters of the Herods and the other elite, means that they were practicing a basic or liberal form of Judaism. It means that they were Jews in their beliefs, but they were liberal Jews. They were tolerant to Western Greco-Roman cultural practices. So they did follow those basic rules. So as we were saying, the people of the Judean elite during the Herodian era, that means middle of the late 1st century BC until middle of the late first century AD, were what we would call liberal Jews. They did the purification practices according to the laws, and they avoided graven images, but they had adopted Greco-Roman cultural elements. And this refers to the upper classes, but including the Herodian family, who were also Jewish upper class members, and the priestly class. So the priests were also part of the Jewish elite, and their homes also followed the same pattern. They also adopted the Greco-Roman cultural practices, and they followed a basic or liberal form of Judaism, which makes it rather interesting because it was priests who began the First Revolt. But these were people who were liberal Jews and open to Greco-Roman cultural practices, which implies that they were involved in the revolt opportunistically. We cannot generalize, of course. Everybody has their own personal ideas, but this is what we see from the material evidence. Also part of this, of the material evidence on cultural and social practices is the use of Greco-Roman place settings when eating and Greco-Roman cooking styles. So we also find in these elite homes Italian, which means what we would call Roman, cooking styles with Italian vessels, including pans, and Greek vessels, which were casserole dishes. And these were for preparing certain types of Italian and Greek food from that era, including a type of Italian or Roman omelette and other kinds of Italian and Greek dishes. And this also includes the serving vessels, the place settings, where there were individual place settings because the traditional way was to serve oneself from a common bowl that everybody shared in the center of the table and dip into the common bowl. And for the elite, they were using individual separate place settings in the Greco-Roman way. And the designs for these vessels were imported from Italy, Cyprus, and Syrophoenicia, or they were modeled after Italian, Greek, and Nabatean ware. And many have a dark red slip. The new classical vessels at that time include pans, as I said, which began in the first century BC in the elite homes and palaces, like in Caesarea and Jericho. And in the early first century AD, they also began to be found in other social areas like Galilee and the countryside outside of Caesarea, including Jewish homes, more in Gentile homes in these other areas, but also in Jewish homes. So on this slide, we'll go into some of the material examples of what we were just speaking of in terms of vessels. And So compared to the elite society, the rest of the society throughout Judea during this period, as we said, had developed a pure style, and it not only involved the place settings, but it was a pure style of ceramic and stone vessel use with no or minimal decorations. And this was not according to the Jewish laws. It was not for purification. It was not required. It was indicative of a social schism. So the lamps, the Roman style lamps of the elite, which we found among the Judean remains from that time, were made from molds, and they were more decorative. And the new pure lamps that began during this period were wheel made and had knife cut nozzles. They had simple decoration. They were either plain or they had simple geometric or roulette or linear decoration. And again, this is a pure style that was not a Jewish law requirement. It was a social choice. The division had never occurred before, and it disappeared with the First Revolt. And there were 16 new workplaces for pure ware, which were built by the early 1st century in Jerusalem, Galilee, and Gaulonitis. Even though foreign imports were easily accessible, they were everywhere, they were affordable, it was easy to get hold of them, but the regular people, which is most of the Judean people, the non-foreigners, were getting their ware from these pure workshop sources. So this indicates to scholars that a new patriotism was evolving only under the Herodian dynasty. And if you look at the images on the right side, at the top register, it's a little bit cut off, sorry, but you have an example in the right side of the top register in the middle of the slide, a plain lamp with a knife cut nozzle, wheel made with a menorah. So the menorah image is found sometimes, and simple decorations, but not other images. In the middle, we find on the left side a mold lamp. So this would be a Roman one with grooves, 1st century BC. And on the right side of this level, we see another mold lamp, Italian style, late 1st century BC to 1st century AD, with an image on it. And in the middle, we have a Judean knife-paired lamp or knife-cut lamp from the 1st century AD, very plain, no decoration. And in the lower register, we can see some mold-made lamps, later 1st century to 2nd century, as we will recall my saying that with the Jewish revolt in the middle of the latter half of the 1st century, this schism disappeared, so it wasn't there anymore. And on the right side, those images on the right, we have some plain, let's see, yeah, here's on the top is the red slip plates and bowls, Eastern sigillata. This is the Roman style or the elite style. In the lower right-hand corner, we have symbols from Gamla, first century BC and first century AD, with the plain style of wear being used. Okay.